Jennifer, you just got back from Germany. What were you doing in Germany, and how can we all get on the same page as you and get to go there for some more?
Well, I was a civilian that worked at the U.S. Army Regional Mortuary, and we handled deaths occurring in Europe and Africa. So, unlike
Wow.
Dover, that handles primarily theater casualties, that's kind of like the entry point into the U.S., we took care of deaths occurring all over Europe, the logistical piece, as well as the preparation and then return to the U.S.
Wow, that's such a cool, very niche thing. So I guess what was it like? So what was your day to day like? Were you going out and picking up loved ones, maybe from the airport or something, or were you more on the preparatory side of things, preparing the remains to be shipped and moved around? I guess give us the in depth of how it was on a day to day basis and what you specifically would do with the remains given any circumstance.
So we took care primarily of movement. So if there was a death in Czech Republic, we would be dealing a lot with host nation because we couldn't just swoop in there and pick someone up unless we made sure we were complying with their regulations and needs, documents, things of that nature. So we did a lot of work with international persons to
Yeah.
coordinate things. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts to that. And then we were primarily responsible as mortuary officers for the preparation of the body and, of course, the dressing. And then we made air schedules to get them back to the States, which can be
Yeah.
complicated with customs considerations and things like
Sure.
that. The families were being served by casualty personnel most of the time. And so they
Okay.
did more of the conversations with the family, whereas we were collecting loved ones and just kind of getting them back home.
Got it. So were they more being prepared wherever the death did occur? And I don't know, do they actually do any sort of embalming, or is it different based on where, they passed away?
Well, no preparation was really done. We did have an occasion, for example, where if a death occurred in Bahrain, they did kind of their version of preservation. But
Hmm.
the Western way of embalming is significantly different because we have different
Yeah.
goals. So in
Right.
Europe, a lot of times the families are renting cemetery property. For example, in Germany too, the caskets or coffins are all wood, they don't have metal. And the idea is to allow decomposition to occur in such a way that the person can rent that cemetery space, it can be reutilized. So
Oh,
instead of trying to delay, very few instances of when they're trying to actually preserve for a longer time. So we did all of the preparation. Most of them were autopsy cases,
sure.
varying levels of trauma, that sort of thing. And then we had to deal with delays in receiving and questionable storage conditions. We have our
I'm
laws about
sure.
refrigeration, and depending on where the death occurred, we kind of never knew what we were going to get.
Right. You probably had a wide variety of different cases. Was it mostly deaths from combat, or was it kind of all over the place since you were helping families throughout Europe and Africa, you said? So I'd imagine it would probably be a variety of things that you're seeing and not just, death from combat.
No, so if it were a theater casualty, it would go to Dover.
Mhm.
We primarily, honestly, saw a lot of suicide cases. And
Ah,
so that
geez.
was the bulk of our cases. Or
Yeah.
accidents, motorcycle accidents occasionally. People travel, so accidents can occur. But
Yep.
unfortunately, I would say the larger number were suicide.
Man, that's got to be so hard.
And they're so
Tough.
young, people are
Yeah.
so young because most of the active duty we served, and then occasionally we would have like a family member of an active duty person or a DoD civilian employee. And sometimes you would actually have a person that died from a health condition or a retiree. We did have a lot of retired service members that they were eligible for care at our mortuary if they chose to go back to the States.
Oh.
But as far as within the majority of the cases, it felt like it was mostly suicide cases.
Oh, gosh, that's really tough. Where were the majority of deaths occurring that you were dealing with, or was it all over the place? And I guess where was the most unique place that someone had passed away?
Well, most of the deaths occurred, you look at areas just like in the States with large populations of service members, whether it's a training command,
Yeah.
certain areas geographically that are going to have more. So, for example, too, Poland has more personnel there. So we may hypothetically
Mm.
see more deaths in Poland as folks are kind of moved around.
Got
Some
it.
of the more interesting locations, the Congo in
Oh,
Africa. That
wow.
one was a little, we did have a couple actually come through from there. And so we had to coordinate care and logistics for them.
What were they
Um,
doing down in the
in
Congo?
Norway. Well, what's interesting is you have to, like, when we were planning movement, it wasn't just a rinse and repeat. We had to really evaluate what resources we had where. So if we
Yep.
knew we had a mortuary affairs collection point somewhere and it was a matter of getting them there to then get onto a plane. So it was, kind of interesting in how you had to problem solve.
Hmm.
Norway, for example, if we had to go to Norway, then we had to coordinate, is there a military flight that happens to be in or out of that area? What resources are where? And it wasn't branch specific. Like it was very purple. If we needed, an aircraft or we needed access to something, we all very much collaborated because again, we took care of all the branches, even though we're an Army mortuary.
Right.
So there's a lot of collaboration, moving parts, things like that. But yeah, the Congo was different for sure. So,
Yeah,
and
no
there's a lot of
kidding.
pressure, just like any ship out or any forwarding
Hmm.
case, you have the other end is waiting, waiting to know when will we get them, when will we see
Of
them, and
course.
you're trying to manage expectations at the same time as make the movements and things happen, work in the back. So there's kind of a lot going on when we have a case.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of different intricacies, and you're probably dealing with a lot of different governments too. So you have to, every single one is different. Just like if you're shipping out from the US to anywhere else in the world, you have to abide by their rules. So I'd imagine shipping out, it would be a very similar thing. And you have to learn a ton about how each different country works.
Yeah, well, thankfully we ship mostly to the US. We know it is needed over
Yeah.
here. So that part was easy. It was moving them even on ground transport because they had to be in a coffin,
Oh,
even just to move from point A to point B to get to us. Coming from Italy, for example,
really?
we did a lot of ground movement. So, or within Germany, they had to be in a wood coffin to even just come to us. So, and then in some countries, the coffin had to
What?
be sealed in front of different people. Yes. So it was like a whole thing depending on where it occurred.
All right, so what
Yeah.
if there was a normal death, not related to what you were doing, so just a normal death in Germany? Does that same law apply to that?
Yes, so anytime you're moving a body within Germany, they need to have them in a coffin. Now, sometimes they'll bring the coffin to
What?
the site. They'll bring it to the hospital. Yeah,
That, that's what I'm
yeah.
asking. So, like, let's say
Sometimes
someone
they
passes
do.
away at home. What? That's
So they
crazy. That doesn't make any
special
sense.
containers for those. They have like this really interesting container type thing that they can put people in because they don't also have refrigeration facilities in many places like we do. So you know how we keep
Right.
our loved ones in our funeral homes over there, they keep them in a place that's usually attached to a cemetery. And the funeral homes
Mhm.
utilize space within these temporary buildings that are cool
Oh,
and have that meet the needed temperature requirements and whatnot, and they keep them there instead of housing them within the funeral home until they have a service. And their turnaround time is very quick. So
right.
unlike in
I
the
did
US,
know
you
that.
say, oh yeah, my brother's flying in and we
Yeah,
need 2 weeks.
12 days.
Not so much. Yeah, not so much over there.
Wow, that is interesting about the renting. So it's sort of like
Hmm.
a co-op, co-working space that the funeral directors are operating out of. That is very interesting.
Yeah, we would have to go there to retrieve loved ones sometimes. We would have to
Yeah.
coordinate. And in Germany, they, unlike, in the US where you can pretty much coordinate to pick up someone whatever hour, right? They have very specific hours, even in the hospitals. If we go to retrieve someone, we have to coordinate in advance and make sure we're in that window of time that we can have access.
That's it's just so cool to see and to hear about how different places operate. What was it? What was the container, I guess, that they would use? So would they ever have like a cot or a gurney, or like how would they? So they would put the
They
remains
would use a
onto
cot or
a
a
gurney,
stretcher, yeah. But they had this
and
container that I've
then
seen, and it was like a metal container that had like a lid and it had handles. I'll have to get a picture for you, but
Ziegler.
it was really interesting. And they would keep them in there, I guess, to kind of move them about, put them in the coffin, things sometimes. So it's interesting, even just watching the equipment they use to remove a coffin in or out of the vehicle. We use church trucks. I've seen where they had like this little, it looked like a tiny cart thing that they would flip up and it would help them get the coffins in. And it was just really fascinating to
Interesting.
see how differently they did things. It was
Yeah.
very practical and efficient in their own way. And it was nice to be able to see alternatives to kind of the way you're accustomed to doing things.
Yeah, it's always good to be learning from other people, other cultures, and see what you can take away from it. And that's really cool. How did you even get involved in the first place in doing this? That's such a very specific thing that you've been doing recently.
Well, back in 2007, I joined the Navy as an active duty hospital corpsman Navy mortician. So at 30 years of age, I was like, hey, here's a fun idea. Let's go to boot camp and become a sailor. So I
Oh,
did
thank you
that.
for your service. Thank you. That's
Thanks.
awesome.
And
Really
that was
cool.
very interesting because I'd been licensed
How
at that
was that
point
at
for 9
30?
years.
How was it at 30?
Oh my
Tough?
gosh, I was the oldest female in my division and I had a mortgage. So there were times when they're yelling at
Oh,
us
yeah.
and I'm thinking, what am I doing right
What
now?
am
Why
I
am I
doing
even doing
here?
this? Like I'm a grown,
Yeah,
formed adult person. Like why am I here basically? But yeah, so boot camp was fun. I lost a lot of weight. And then
there you go.
I got to be a corpsman, which was kind of counterintuitive because I had to go to school to learn life-saving skills. And I mean, when you're in the
Yeah,
mortuary field, you're like, do I wait for the code blue? I joke about this all the time because they would have a code blue drill, and I'm like, do I wait to see if they made it? Do I show up to save them? Where am I supposed to be in this whole scheme,
right.
right? But I finished all of that training and got to work in headquarters. And we did a lot of counseling of the casualty assistance officers that go out to the homes. We
Okay.
coordinated with escorts, and this was during wartime, so we were a little busy. And then
Yeah.
we'd go to Dover for a refresher. I went there for a mass casualty event as
Mm.
well. So it was kind of a busy chunk of time. That was between 2007 2012. So I
What
had
was
that
the mass
experience of
casualty
being.
event?
It was in August. It was called Extortion 17. It actually just had the anniversary date, and that was when the helicopter carrying the SEALs was shot down.
Yeah.
There was considerable. It was the largest Navy loss with all the special ops folks in one place at one time. So
Wow.
I actually flew. I was
Terrible.
stationed in Italy when that happened, so I flew from Italy to Dover to just help provide hands on deck. And all I remember is uniforms, uniforms. Just trying to get everybody
Yeah,
uniforms ready, trying to meet, escorts as they would fly in, which is very hectic because also Dover had other cases coming in that were, from other branches and other situations. So just a
sure.
really busy time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd imagine. Did you get to spend any time elsewhere throughout Europe? And I guess what was your favorite spot that you were stationed in?
Well, the Navy morticians don't have a lot of options. They don't put you on a boat, you don't deploy. So I guess that could be a good thing. But as far as where they put you, sometimes you're kind of in a landlocked desk job, or you have the good fortune that I did to be stationed in Naples, Italy, which was fantastic. I was there for 3 years. I
Nothing wrong with
traveled.
that.
Yes, I did the hostel thing, the whole backpack hostel thing. Wake up, make sure your liver's still
Nice.
there. I did all of that stuff. And it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful place. So that was my
I'm
favorite for sure.
sure. Oh,
So
that's
having that
wonderful. What a
experience when this job opened in Germany, I was like, well, because there are different ways the DoD
fitting.
embalms and different things. So I just went ahead and applied. A couple of my prior colleagues from the Navy days were there. One was the
Hmm.
director. We just kind of was like a little family reunion. Mortuary staff with Navy morticians for the most part. So
That's so cool. Wow, what a
yeah.
unique and fun experience and something that a lot of funeral directors probably don't know you could go out and do. So it's like,
Mhm.
hey, if you want to try something different, serve your country and maybe get to travel a little, enjoy yourself, like that didn't sound too bad. From having the phones at night and making house calls, that sounds a little bit better to me.
Yeah. Well, we did have a phone and we did get called upon at weird times, but thankfully not
True.
not as frequently as like your average funeral home experience. So.
Right. Right. So what's going on now with you? You're back. You're in Texas now. What's the deal?
So I just got back. I started a company in May, a little veteran-owned lady biz, where I offer training and educational content. I've done some work with Continuing Vision, with some CEU webinars. I've done some articles and different publications with Raven Plume and also Continuing Vision. I actually just had one come out today from Funeral Vision that I wrote. And I also have
Cool.
my own little blog site where I write blogs. I make little YouTube videos on what will seem basic when you've been in the business for a minute, but like how to operate the church truck. I do an embalming
Sure.
machine comparison, and I don't have any suppliers or anyone that's like telling me, what to say or
To sway
influencing my.
you.
So I
So what's your
basically
machine? What's your machine? You got to
I,
tell us. Come on. Come
the new
on.
frigid machine, the new frigid machine.
Ah, everyone's favorite,
Yes.
all the colors.
Well, I loved it because it was so precise. Because, like when I'm
Really?
doing a case and there's a lot of head trauma, I may need to utilize that instant fixation technique or something like that. And because it tells you the exact pressure and exact rate, and you can really play with it, it's almost like it gives you more information to hone in on what you're doing more effectively.
Mm,
So I did
that's
enjoy
nice.
that machine for that reason. The technology was great. We had a Dodge machine, we had a Portaboy, and like I said in my video, any machine will do the job for you. It's just
Yeah.
I liked knowing more, and I feel like the new frigid machine let me know more of what was actually going on in there. And it mixes continuously.
Yeah.
You're not getting funky clumps of stuff. It has a little filter thing.
Right.
So I was very excited about it. Ours was not pink or lavender. It was a traditional black.
Oh,
We did not upgrade it because
oh,
it is the government bought it. But I did get to work with it, and I enjoyed it. I liked it quite a bit.
nice. Yeah,
So
I've never used one personally, but they are pretty sleek, and I have heard very good things. So that's nice that
they're very
you're able
quiet
to give
too.
it a
It doesn't
shot.
sound like an
Yeah.
old car muffler thing or something going on. It's very quiet.
Or you get the pulse of ding 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 ding. I just remember every pulse. I'd always go pulse on the way up. That was my whole thing for uh trying to control the flow going and all that. Anyway, so keep going. So you got your videos, you got your blog. What are you thinking? What is your next thing, and how are you trying to move on with your career? Well, so is this what your goal is, to build this and educate and speak to people?
I like to imagine a mortuary Mary Poppins, right? She floats in with her little bag, and inside is maybe a trauma head. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now, right? I
Hilarious.
float in, I bring the training to you. Leadership says, here's what I want, and I create something. And as an educator, I know how to create content that is understandable, appeals to people, and I can work with their schedules, and I can go on site and deliver training, which I enjoy doing. I have a lot of good
Yeah.
technical experience. I attended the European School of Embalming Skills while I was in
Ooh.
Germany, which was a very intense reconstructive and restorative training. It was 2 weeks, and it was
Okay. Uh,
phenomenal. I learned
Yeah.
so many things. I put a head back together, and all I had was a tongue. That was all I had.
Come on,
Yes.
elaborate. What do you mean? How?
So
How?
basically, so basically, level one of the class, we were partnered up, and we had donated cases, and we were able to work on things like swollen eyes, discolorations, wax work, suturing. It was really fun to be a student when you are an instructor. It's nice to be the student for a
Yeah.
change. And the instructor of the course, his name was Alan, and then we had Philip. But Alan, he came around with like this little measuring tool, and like we were doing sutures with dental floss, and we had to do them so small that he could run his finger across them and not feel them. So he would come by and feel them and run his little tools and whatnot. They had flashlights. They'd come look at your wax work. So that was really
That's
cool. And we
cool.
did do some reconstruction on a skull, and it had more pieces than you would experience out in the field. So it was really
Yeah,
challenging. That was
I'm
week one.
sure.
There were about a dozen of us. And in those classes,
Wow.
they only offer them like once a year. You get on a list early. It's a small group thing. Week two, there were 7 of us. We each had our own cadavers. And we ended up doing some facial dissection and actual recreating everything from a stump, basically, with a tongue sticking out. So you had to,
Wow.
I remember feeling like cervical vertebra. I could feel them. They were there. So I'm like, okay, this is a good guide.
Ooh.
But we had to uh, basically kind of start. We knew what the person looked like, but we were attempting to restore. And yeah, it was really intense. It was very intense. And there were moments where you would stare at these little bones and be like, you know what, I'm gonna just walk away because you just stare at them, waiting for them to kind of look like they go together. And that it was
It's the
really
ultimate puzzle.
challenging. Yes, it was a puzzle with too many pieces, and some were missing. Some pieces were missing even. So yeah, so I did that. I learned a ton of things. I got really excited. I tend to be excited anyway. I do airbrush things. And so I was like, oh, it'd
Nice.
be cool is to be able to go to a funeral home and just do some training with them so they can gain more knowledge about this without having to come to me or only
Right.
work with what I work with. You know what I mean? So that's basically what the thinking was. And I'd like to create content that's relevant for people who are like things again that we take for granted having been around for a minute, like the church truck or
Right.
like something really simple. How to roll
Yeah.
a person over like correctly where you're not compromising tissue, right? Little things like that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm creating little tidbits of content, like I said, little Instagram things and YouTube things, and I like to make my stuff available. So if people can use it, and another kind of catalyst for it is there was in one of the little Facebook groups, there was a student who needed help filling out a 2063, which is a DD embalming form. And
Hmm.
and they weren't from my school, they're from a different school, but their instructors were having a hard time
Ah.
articulating how to fill it out. So I'm like, I'm gonna make you a video because I know what this is.
Yeah.
So I made them a little video, I saved it in YouTube, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna keep doing this. So that's kind of what I do, is create content and educational things and bring training to the people with the Mary Poppins bag of heads. So
That's so cool. Expand on for me, reconstructing from the tongue up. What specifically was that like? How did you go about that process? And what did you physically do? Like, how were you able to do it? Like, you can get
well,
into the
basically,
weeds for us. Give us a lesson, Jennifer.
yes. Okay, I'm gonna give you a free lesson. No, I'm kidding.
Thank
But
you. And I pray that I
yes,
never have to deal with this situation.
I know. Oh my God.
Disclosure.
So we got in there, and the first thing you have to do, like with any, reconstruction situation, now the case had already been embalmed, so tissue's dry, right?
Okay.
That part's done.
Yep.
So then you're really just trying to figure out put the pieces together.
Yep.
And we had a fake skull, and I would often walk over and study it. I would study the underside, I would study the top, I would look at the
Right.
lines in it, the thickness, right? And
Yeah.
so, kind of understanding how the pieces go together, the frame and magnum piece, like find the pieces you can identify, the temporal skull piece is thinner and all these things. And so you kind of just start from there. You start putting things together. We used wires and different things. Once you
Oh,
get the skull, and the face was also in pieces. So I had to rebuild jaw, reconnect the maxilla to the rest of the face.
yeah.
And it's tricky because you're trying to reconnect everything, and you don't have a lot to kind of go by, like when you're putting a piece back, you know what I mean, of the inside.
Right.
So you do your best you can
To
do
make
with
it
that. If you're
uniform.
missing an
Yeah.
area, you just kind of fill it in. And then once we did that, got the skull back,
Was it
we
a lot
actually had
of
done.
glue and wire? How did you put everything back together?
So we basically utilized wire and plaster, and we utilized the
Tell me
wire
about the
to get the
wire. How
pieces
so?
together. So you would take two pieces, and we had a drill. So we would drill holes together to
Ah,
connect the two pieces. We would utilize wire, and you would tighten it as much as you could, which was interesting
got it.
because sometimes when you're working on, doing a reconstruction, it looks like you're missing pieces just by virtue of not having them tight enough. So you have to tighten without
Right.
them overlapping, right? So that was really interesting. So you get it all nice and tight, and you've got to make sure too, do you need a dowel, right? So I had to put a dowel inside to give reinforcement because you
Yep.
want to make sure you have stability when you're doing something like that. And then once you get all that kind of pieced together, you're wired up, good to go. You add your plaster. And what was interesting is they added salt to their plaster. It was kind of cool, and I guess, expedited
Dehydrating?
how it firmed up. It was
Uh-huh.
different from what
Firming.
we used because I know like
Yeah.
the plaster we had at the mortuary would dry pretty quick. So
Yeah.
we did that, and then you remove the
No paper
wires.
mache?
No, well, no, not, no, not today.
Oh,
We would cut wires and remove them so you could lay the two. And then you would think that, putting the face and everything back would be easier because we actually had removed it. It was a complete dissection, which was something
woo,
that I had been really intimidated by the idea of it.
intense.
It's the Glenn Talon technique. And what it does is it allows you to get access to what you need. Because if all of
How?
that were broken and closed, you wouldn't be able to access it. And keep in mind,
So,
some of these countries, they have 4 to 7 days to do all of this. So, I'm
how did you do that part?
motivated and describing that.
How did you do that part? Was it a scalpel or forceps or aneurysm hook in there? Like, how did you do
The
that? That's
dissection phase
crazy.
was, I know it was. And like I said, I was very intimidated by it. But it's just a very meticulous, and there was already a suture or an incision for an autopsy, right? So there was
Autopsy,
already
right?
that autopsy incision. So you utilize that incision, and you're basically just extending it. So you're taking it down, you're taking it out,
Folding
and
over.
then right, and then as you're folding, you're just very carefully excising away, and you have to be
Yeah.
really careful because, like for example, the tissue of this area of your face is very thin. So as you're
Yeah.
excising, if you're not careful, you have to figure out where to sever the tissue here because that nose is kind of your beacon, it turns out. So that was
Wow.
very intense.
Wow. I hope it's embalmers
Yeah.
only listening today because this is some crazy cool
I
wild
will tell
stuff
you,
if
my
you've never been
husband
in the
does not
tech
know.
room
I
person.
tried to tell him about it, and he was not having it. I was like, "Do you want to hear what I did this week?"
No.
He's like, "Really? I don't. I don't want to hear
Mm-mm.
anything about it." I was like,
Keep it to
"Okay."
yourself, sweetheart.
I said, "It was really fascinating." He's like, "I believe you," and we'll leave it at that. So, yes. But yeah, and then so you put that back,
Wow.
but then what's interesting is you've still got to make sure like the person I had a very full face. So I had to make sure that
Oh,
I restored
built
that
up.
shape. I had to make sure my nose was in the right place. I had, you're looking at symmetry. I'm on a stool looking down to see what it actually, because the tables didn't adjust. I'm looking down to see what it looks like from all these different angles.
Right, because isn't
And
that
then it
supposed
was
to be the best angle is from, the top looking down?
right. And what's interesting too in Europe, they don't have, how we have like the viewing side. The whole thing is the viewing side because they're in
Right.
coffins, right?
You
The
could go on
family
either
can walk
side,
all
right.
around. So either side is
Mhm.
of equal value when it
Not
comes to how you look
ideal.
at people. Yes. So
See,
it
we
was just a
Americans, we
tedious
know a thing or
process.
two.
Yes. So it was tedious, but it was a good learning experience. And there were times I wanted to just keep working through lunch because I got so focused. And there was one day where the instructor's like, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. And he had his little bag and I'm like, okay. And I'm still working. And he kind of paused. He was like, I'll see you
Get out.
tomorrow. Like, you need to pack up, I was like, okay, okay, because I got so laser focused in. And then there were other times where it's like, you know what, this isn't looking right to me. I need to just walk away from it. And I would go visit
Yes.
one of my German friends that was also there and see how her case was going. Because she spoke English. A lot of them spoke English and French. Um,
Nice.
so I was actually the only
That
native
helps.
English speaker in the
Oh.
room on week one. Week two, we had a gentleman come from the UK. So there were two of us. But
Ah,
yeah, it was
darn it.
it was wild though. It was great. And I
Mm.
logged how much time it took me from start to finish, including full make. I did full airbrush and everything. And it took me 24 hours, which it was a longer
Wow.
time than had once. I think once I became, more had more practice time with the skull, become more familiar with those components, I'll be able to do a little faster. But there were a lot of pieces too, and that was a complete
Right.
start to finish situation. But yeah, it took me 24 hours.
Incredible. What would you give yourself out of 10? Decimal point. Rate yourself.
Well, I will say,
The final.
from oh, out of the result, I could recognize
Yeah.
the person as what they look like. So I would say
That's
I would say an 8 actually. And I made the person a little sassy. I, had fun with some lashes and things. So
nice.
they were ready. They were ready for wherever they were going next. But
Wow.
I could see,
Incredible.
I was really happy with my proportions because I would look sideways and everything was
Yeah.
where it needed to be. And, they told us in the class, you're not going to get perfection.
No,
And
not gonna
it's
happen.
important, you're just giving them something. So anything I would have given that person would have been
Mhm.
better than just a headless person with a tongue. So you're already
Yeah,
winning to give them a person.
it's a
And so that was
guarantee.
really one of the key takeaways. Yeah. It was a great class. So
Wow, unbelievable class. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things, the more you stare at it, you just get that tunnel vision. It's like you need
mhm.
to step away. When you're doing intensive RA work, you gotta give yourself a minute sometimes. When you're
Yes,
going at it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hour, my goodness, step away. You need to.
yes, definitely. Because there was a time I looked at the
Very cool.
bones and I just stared at them, and I hit, and like so much time passed where I felt like I wasn't making any progress. And then finally I
Yep.
went. I didn't, and I don't smoke, so the instructor's like, "Do you smoke?" I said no. He says, "Well, why don't you go take a smoke break and not smoke?" Right? So I came back in. I went with the smokers for a second and came back in, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the bones were like, "Hello, we go over here." I was like, "Yes." So it worked out really good.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. That's really amazing. What a good experience for you, and now you have that in your back pocket for, whatever
Yes.
you need in the future. So, what is your favorite class then that you teach, and what are some of the subjects that you like to focus on when you're going, I guess, at school, and then more the in person one-on-ones with live, licensed funeral directors. So tell us for both of those.
So I primarily teach law at the mortuary school. I don't know why some
Oh,
of the people don't like teaching law. I like
surprising.
it. I give them scenarios. It's so fun. But the things I consider fun, like reading about the history of a retort or something, other people are like, okay, yeah, super fun, right?
Yeah,
I am a
yawn.
nerd. I know, but I love when I'm working with, because I did a lot of training with soldiers while I was in the mortuary.
Right.
And we would
Yeah.
do stretcher training. I would teach them how to load and unload the stretcher and all these other little things. And I get
Cool.
excited when I'm teaching because I feel really passionate. I love technical
Yeah.
training, because I love science and anatomy and all that's very interesting. Restorative
Yeah.
art, reconstruction. I love that. Embalming. because I've done a lot of autopsy cases, difficult cases. So I do like to discuss those things as well with students. I get excited about that. But I can pretty much hop into any area of the funeral home, and I am, again, being the nerd, I get excited. So I can talk about things like time management or merchandise or something like that and get just as
Yeah.
excited. So
Did you have any experience inside a funeral home? It seems like you have such a wide variety. Have you ever actually get to spend some time working in a funeral home at this point in your career?
yes, gosh, yeah. So I was in the civilian sector. I was licensed since 1998. I know what you're thinking. I look so young. I know it's the formaldehyde. The formaldehyde stove.
I'm not, I'm serious. Oh my gosh. No way.
Yes, I came right
What?
out of the womb to mortuary school, like from
No
the
kidding.
canal to Gupton Jones. No, I had an aneurysm hook. I was ready to go. No, but so I started in the funeral home when I was 16. I got my first job. I don't have family in the field. And we had one little
Wow.
funeral home in the town. I like telling the story. We had one little funeral home in the town that I worked in. And I interviewed the owner, and he was really kind and patient and told me all about what
Yeah.
funeral services, gave me a tour. And I was like, well, I need to start working in a funeral home before I go to mortuary college. And
Hmm.
I asked him for a job. He's like, I don't have a job for, a 16-year-old kid. So I was like, okay. So I waited, and then I called him a week later. I was like, hey, I'm just seeing if anything's changed. But he's like,
Sure you don't
no,
have
right?
that
So
job?
finally, after so many weeks, he was like, I'm going to hire you. Just you'll leave me alone. And he did. He hired me. I washed cars. I vacuumed the chapel. And then over
Yep.
time, I proved myself, and they showed me, little bits over time. But right from there, I've worked for Stewart back when Stewart was around. I
Hmm.
was working for them during the acquisition with SCI, so that was interesting. I've worked for
Cool.
private firms. I've worked in sales. I've actually done some prearranged funeral sales management in SCI.
Oh,
So I've worn the different hats within the funeral home,
you
corporate
sure
versus,
have.
regular individual ownership. So I have a
Yeah.
and I was licensed in 6 states over the course of my career. So I've gone from Washington
Wow.
State, Tennessee, because I'm a tumbleweed. And if I see something interesting that I've not done before, or that, I'm just going to go, I'm just going to pack up and go. So
Seems like
six
it.
states, I have Florida and Texas still, because Florida is home to me. Texas is home to my husband. And I do
Got it.
contract work here. I could do contract work in either state. Actually, I can do contract work anywhere, but I do contract work on regular type stuff here. But if somebody
Nice.
had a case and needed help, they could call me, and I could grab the Mary Poppins
Yeah.
bag, and we would put that person together again. But yeah, so I've seen quite a few different funeral home environments.
You've seen plenty. Is that your favorite thing to do now? Is it more the teaching, or do you like getting, your hands dirty still and getting in on those difficult cases when someone contracts you?
I like I tend to do teaching while working, even if I'm not necessarily like there to teach. If you're in the
Of
room with
course you
me,
do.
I'm gonna be and I will say I'm at least good at like working while I talk. I don't do the thing where you pause to explain something. I actually keep going.
Right.
But like so, and I
Yeah.
think part of that is working with soldiers. I have soldiers that were interested, so I would explain what I was doing as I did it, and I wouldn't miss a beat. I love the idea of teaching and sharing knowledge just within our community. I think that's important.
It's
Instead of
huge.
hoarding, and it
Yep.
is huge, and I feel like it's difficult to kind of see that in a lot of instances. I love working with students
Hmm.
too, though, because they have such a fresh view of everything. And so when you work with them, you're back there where they were. And I think it keeps you locked into that experience of I've never worked in a funeral home before, but here I am in class, right? So now I have to make them understand things and make things relatable for them. And then also in a slightly vampirish way, I take some of that enthusiasm they have as new entrants into the field, and I find that to be really enjoyable too. So
Yeah. Oh, that's cool that you still get the thrill out of both aspects of things, and you've had so many amazing experiences. Give us one, that story that you tell at a party. If someone wants to hear that one story that you like to tell more than any of the others, give us that one.
okay, who's my audience at this party? Let's because if it's my
Let's
husband
say
and
it's
his friends, it's
let's
not gonna
let's
be a
say
good
it's
story.
someone that's not too squeamish, but they wanna hear some good juice.
Okay, well sometimes I'll talk about the case where I thought I saw the arms move on the person, and this is years ago when I was an
Okay.
intern. So
Now, of
gross.
course it was.
It's funny though. It's funny. It's not gross though.
All right. I
Um,
like it.
I mean, I've got maggot stories. I've got all of that.
Oh
That
yeah.
that fun stuff too. But
Pleasant.
depending on the audience and where we are in the dinner process, I might go to this one. So I was an intern back in the day. and my internship started out where I was just thrown in the back, call us if you need anything, which really was not great. So that was my initial
Yeah.
experience. So I was back there toiling away, learning things and by myself, talking to the gentleman that I was preparing in his little suit and everything. And because I would do that
Hmm.
periodically by myself. And you all do it. So I'm not weird.
Of
You do it.
course.
So we used dry cleaning plastic at the time, and I would put the plastic under the collar and have it down under
Yep.
the hands because I like to dress
Oh
and
yeah.
do cosmetics. And I had gotten
Same.
him all
Yeah.
ready for cosmetizing. It was the end of the day, so pushed my little dressing table into its little spot, bid him adieu. Day was over. I came back the next day, and when I flipped the light on, his like flew up like that, right? And I was
For
like, oh,
real?
I thought for real.
What?
Here's what happened.
Oh
I
my
had put the dressing
God.
table under the vent, right? Under the exhaust fan thing. And when I flipped the light, I hit the little exhaust fan. It grabbed the plastic. So his arms never moved, but the plastic did. Oh my God, it scared the crap out of me. I was
Oh.
like, because it looked like his arms moved. And yeah, for a minute, I like had a
I'm,
brief like flicker of a career question mark. But yeah, that
I
was
was gonna
super
say
funny.
that would make anyone question their career choice.
Yes, that was something. And then I had, coworkers that we would get into
Oh.
shenanigans and play jokes on each other. And I learned that if you mix coffee with
Uh-huh.
sealing powder, it does look like waste material. So that was a
Coffee
fun,
with what?
like incision sealer, the gray
Sealing
powder
powder?
that you.
Yeah.
Mhm. It's super
Oh
gross. So you can put it in
God.
like a cookie tin and give it to someone, and they have no.
I've done that
You can
before
have
with
fun with
I
that.
think it was like food dye or something. I was messing around with incision sealer before, and it looked like a
Mhm.
snow cone, and I was like, "Oh man, this could be
Do
dangerous."
so many things with that. So many things. But yeah, so Christmas is going to be around the
Uh,
corner. Not sure what to get someone at the, joking white elephant. You get one of those little cookie tins. They get all excited, and then you put the fake duty in there, and it's great for parties. So
oh
yeah,
gosh, there's
you have
gonna be
to
a lot
try
of that
that.
going around now. No. Apologies to
Nope.
anyone that gets duped on that. That is too funny. Hilarious stuff and very informative too. I think we learned a lot. Jennifer, where can we find you if someone wants to learn more from your experiences or just wants to get to know you better? Give us.
Sure. I'm actually doing a mentor program with Continuing Vision too. So I'm in there. But if
Ooh,
you're looking for my material, I have a link tree. The name of my business is
perfect.
Mulling Mortician. You'll see the little Thinking Anubis. That's my logo. You can find
Yeah,
me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube channel. I did finally relent and get TikTok because everyone was telling me I needed to do it. So I just literally did that
you gotta
today.
cave in.
I had to give in, yeah. But so yeah,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
find me, like I said, all over the place in those common areas. And again, it's just Mulling Mortician.
Awesome. Well, Jennifer, thanks so much for taking the time, sharing your knowledge and your stories. That was a lot of fun.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.